So next, let's talk about adding effects to your animation. So here I have a little frame-by-frame fire that I drew. It's looking a little lackluster. Let's add some effects to it. So you'll see I have 3 layers. I have my fire yellow color, my orange color, and then the soot on the ground. So in order to add an effect to both of these layers, I'm gonna shift select both yellow and orange, right click, and group that selection. And once I have my layers in a group, I can now add an effect to this single layer, which will affect both of these layers at the same time. So I'll right click on my layer, go to Insert, Effects, and here's all the effects that we can add. Let's do something simple. Let's add a blur. So I've added my blur, and right now it's not doing anything. To change the settings on your blur, we need to go down to our timeline, click this plus button right here, and then you'll see options for the effect that you have. And over here on the right are your parameters. If you don't see this, it's this little parameters button down here on your timeline. You can click that to toggle your parameters on and off. So this is where you adjust the settings in your effects. And it's also where you'll add any animation that you want. So these work the same as motion keys. So I can click my first frame, add a keyframe, and then go to frame 10, add a keyframe, and then up my radius, say to about 5. So I have a blur of 5 going on, but it's not showing up. That's because we're in our OpenGL view right now. So if you want to see how your final effect is going to look, we want to click our render view. And now we can see the blur is in effect. And since we have that animation, it starts off not blurred at all, and then gradually gets more and more blurred. So you could animate transparency fading on and off this way, just by clicking the plus button and animating the parameters down here. So if I don't want that effect anymore, I can click on it and click this minus button to get rid of it. Now let's add another effect that's super useful to know. I'm going to right click my layer, go to Insert, Effects, and I'm going to select Cutter. So what Cutter is it's sort of like a mask. So to use it, I need to create a new layer. So I'm going to click my Create New Layer button, and I'm going to call this Mask. And I'm just going to draw a simple green shape just to give you an idea what it does. So now if we go back to our Cutter effect, click this plus button, you'll see this matte option right here, and it says drop layer here. So we're going to take our mask layer, click it to select it, then click and drag it into our matte. So now you'll see it's cutting out anywhere that green shape was. So if I frame forward, you can see it's happening for 1 frame and then not happening. Well, that's because our mask only lasts for 1 frame. So just like with our other layers, we want to extend it for the length of our scene. So now our fire is being masked out for the entire length of our animation. And if I wanted to invert this so it's showing everything except for the green, I can right click on my cutter layer and select layer properties, or I can just double click on it. And here we have an inverted checkbox. So if I select that, it will invert our mask so it shows only where the green is. For the final effect of this fire, I'm going to add just a small blur to it, just so it blends in with the background a little bit. So I'm going to click Effects and Blur. So right now it's not doing anything, because if we click the plus on our blur, our radius is set to 0. So I'm going to set that to 2, and you'll see it adds a little subtle blur effect. And again, I'm in my render view so I can see what this looks like. Here's what it looks like in the OpenGL view, so you can't see the blur. If you want to see how your animation looks while playing it, we want to click this Render and Play button down here, which has a little yellow star on it. So I click that, and I've rendered the scene before, so I'll get a little pop-up saying, do you want to render these frames again? I'm going to click Yes. And it'll pop up a new player where we can see how our final animation looks like when it's all rendered. Pretty cool. In the next section, we'll talk about adding a camera and animating it.